What you're about to see has never been captured on camera before. Deep in Florida's swamps, something is hunting. Something that shouldn't be here, and it's winning. Over the past 2 decades, an entire ecosystem has been rewritten. Mammals that once thrived here have vanished. Birds have disappeared. The food chain itself has been shattered. And the predator, responsible? It came from halfway around the world. This is the story of how one species brought America's most unique wilderness to its knees, and the desperate race to save what's left before it's too late. A story of silent predators, disappearing wildlife, and an ecosystem pushed to the brink of collapse. What's happening in Florida's Everglades is more than an environmental crisis. It's a warning about the fragility of nature and the consequences of our choices. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why. What happens in these swamps matters to every single one of us. The Burmese python. Native to the tropical forests and grasslands of Southeast Asia, this apex predator is built for domination. Growing to over 20 feet long and weighing more than 200 pounds, they possess crushing power, capable of killing prey as large as deer. Their heat-sensing organs can detect warm-blooded animals in complete darkness. They can hold their breath underwater for 30 minutes. And they can go 6 months to a year without eating, lying in wait with supernatural patience. In their natural habitat, the jungles of Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam, they're kept in check by their environment, competition with other predators, and limited territory. But in Florida, they have no natural enemies, no competition, and unlimited space to expand. The invasion began quietly in the 1980s and early 1990s. Exotic pet owners, seduced by the idea of owning a powerful snake, purchased baby pythons that seemed manageable. But these snakes grow fast. Within a few years, that cute baby becomes a massive predator, requiring expensive food, specialized housing, and expert handling. Overwhelmed and unprepared, some owners made a catastrophic choice. They released them into the wild. Then came Hurricane Andrew in August 1992. The Category 5 storm devastated South Florida, destroying homes, businesses, and an exotic animal breeding facility. Dozens, possibly hundreds of pythons escaped into the surrounding wetlands. It was the perfect storm, literally, for an ecological disaster. What started with a handful of pythons has exploded into a breeding population estimated between tens of thousands to possibly 300,000 snakes slithering through the Everglades. And here's what makes this terrifying. These snakes are nearly invisible. They're ambush predators, perfectly camouflaged in browns and greens that blend seamlessly with wetland vegetation. They move silently through water and grass. By the time scientists realized what was happening, by the time anyone understood the scope of this invasion, the pythons had already established themselves across thousands of square miles. The Everglades, one of the most biodiverse ecosystems in North America, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, had become ground zero for an ecological catastrophe that would unfold over decades. For years, the full extent of the damage remained hidden beneath the surface of the swamp. Park rangers noticed fewer mammals during patrols. Hunters reported strange absences. But it wasn't until researchers deployed cutting-edge technology that the true horror became visible. Drone footage reveals vast stretches of wetland that appear eerily still. Where once you'd see constant movement, raccoons foraging, deer drinking, rabbits darting through grass, now there's an unnatural silence. Motion-activated cameras, deployed across hundreds of locations throughout Everglades National Park, tell a shocking story through what they don't capture. Before the python invasion, These cameras would record dozens of mammal sightings per week. Now, days pass with nothing, sometimes weeks. Where researchers once documented thriving populations, they now record almost nothing. The numbers are staggering, almost impossible to believe. Studies conducted by the U.S. Geological Survey show that populations of raccoons have declined by 99% in some areas. Think about that, 99%. For every 100 raccoons that once lived in parts of the Everglades, only one remains. Opossums, down 98%. White-tailed deer have nearly vanished from regions where they were once so abundant that spotting them was guaranteed. Rabbits, marsh rabbits that used to be everywhere, are now functionally extinct in large swaths of the park. Bobcats, foxes, even armadillos, all decimated. But the python's impact doesn't stop with mammals. Wading birds, the iconic herons and egrets and wood storks that define the Everglades, that appear on postcards and in every documentary about Florida's wetlands, have suffered dramatic population crashes. Why? Because pythons are eating their chicks directly from nests. They're consuming eggs. They're climbing trees to raid rookeries. And they're competing for the same prey that these birds depend on: the fish, the small mammals, the reptiles. Some bird species have abandoned nesting sites they've used for generations, driven away by this new threat they haven't evolved to recognize or defend against. Researchers have documented python tracks leading directly to destroyed nests, a crime scene written in the mud. The underwater cameras reveal something even more disturbing. With fewer mammals drinking at the water's edge, with fewer birds fishing in the shallows, with fewer animals moving through the ecosystem, the entire rhythm of life has changed. Fish populations are shifting in distribution and behavior. Alligators, once the undisputed rulers of these swamps, the top predator, for millions of years, now share their territory with a competitor they can't easily defeat. Adult pythons are too large for most alligators to prey on, creating an unprecedented situation. Perhaps most striking is what's happening to the vegetation itself. Ecosystems are complex webs of interaction. Without mammals browsing on certain plants, those plants grow unchecked. Without birds dispersing seeds in their normal patterns, plant communities shift. Without small mammals aerating soil and creating burrows, the very structure of the habitat changes. The Everglades we see today is not the Everglades of 30 years ago. It's becoming something else, something we don't fully understand yet. Scientists use the term trophic cascade to describe this phenomenon. When the removal of a top predator, or in this case, the introduction of a new one, creates rippling effects throughout every level of an ecosystem. We're watching a trophic cascade in real time, and it's devastating. Fighting back against an invisible enemy that can be anywhere, that breeds rapidly producing clutches of up to 100 eggs, and that thrives in an environment where humans struggle to survive, seems almost impossible. But Florida isn't giving up. The state can't give up. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission has launched an unprecedented effort to control the python population. Python hunting programs now employ full-time specialists who work year-round, tracking and removing these invaders from the most affected areas. These aren't casual hunters, they're experts who understand python behavior, who can read signs in the landscape, who spend countless hours wading through swamps in brutal heat and humidity. Some hunters use specially trained dogs to sniff out pythons. These detection dogs can locate the scent of a python that hasn't been in an area for hours. Others rely on technology that sounds like science fiction: radio transmitters, surgically implanted in male pythons during breeding season, which act as unwitting scouts, leading hunters directly to females and their nesting sites. It's called the Judas snake technique, and it's one of the most effective methods we have. During the annual Florida Python Challenge, hundreds of participants from across the country descend on South Florida, competing for prizes and the honor of removing as many pythons as possible. The events have become media spectacles, drawing attention to the crisis. In recent years, combined efforts have removed thousands upon thousands of snakes. Professional hunters working year-round have taken out tens of thousands more. But here's the sobering, frustrating reality. Even with all these efforts, even with all these snakes removed, experts estimate they're barely making a dent in the overall population. For every python caught, dozens or hundreds remain hidden in the vast wetlands. The breeding rate simply outpaces our removal capacity. So scientists are getting creative. They're exploring biological controls, studying diseases that affect pythons in their native range to see if any could be safely introduced here. They're researching python reproductive biology to find vulnerabilities. Some researchers are investigating pheromones and chemical attractants that could lure pythons to specific locations. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are being deployed to process the millions of images from camera traps, identifying patterns in python movement and behavior that humans might miss. Thermal imaging drones scan the swamps at night when pythons emerge to hunt and when their body heat contrasts against the cooler environment. These drones can cover vast areas quickly, something impossible for human hunters. Community involvement has become crucial to the effort. Local residents are trained to identify pythons, understand their behavior, and safely report sightings to authorities. Veterinarians and wildlife rehabilitators throughout South Florida are on alert for any signs of python presence, checking pets and livestock for signs of python attacks. Environmental education programs teach Floridians, especially children who represent the future, about the importance of never releasing exotic pets into the wild, about the interconnectedness of ecosystems, about being responsible stewards of the environment. The economic cost is enormous. Millions of dollars spent annually on removal programs, research, education, and habitat restoration. But the cost of inaction would be far greater. The complete loss of an irreplaceable ecosystem, the extinction of species found nowhere else on Earth, the collapse of a natural system that provides clean water and storm protection for millions of people. Here's the uncomfortable truth that we need to face directly. We created this crisis. Every single python slithering through the Everglades, every native animal killed, every nest raided, every species pushed toward extinction, it's all there because of human decisions, human negligence, human arrogance. Pet owners who didn't understand what they were taking on, who didn't research, who didn't plan for the future. Breeders who prioritized profit over responsibility, who sold dangerous animals to unprepared buyers. A society that treated living creatures as disposable commodities, as status symbols, as toys to be discarded when they became inconvenient. The python invasion is a stark reminder that our actions have consequences that ripple far beyond what we can immediately see. When we introduce species to new environments, whether intentionally or accidentally, we're conducting an experiment with stakes we don't fully understand. We're playing with forces we can't control, gambling with ecosystems that took thousands of years to develop. But it's not just about pythons. Florida faces invasions from dozens of non-native species, each one causing its own damage. Massive iguanas consuming native vegetation, venomous lionfish decimating reef ecosystems, African rock pythons, even larger than Burmese pythons, establishing populations. tegu lizards eating ground-nesting bird eggs, feral hogs destroying habitat. Each species represents a failure of stewardship, a moment when we prioritized our own desires over ecological balance. And climate change is making matters worse, adding another layer of complexity to an already dire situation. As temperatures rise, pythons can expand their range northward, potentially colonizing additional states. Warming waters allow them to remain active year-round, rather than experiencing a slower winter period. Stronger, more frequent hurricanes create more opportunities for captive animals to escape, for facilities to be damaged, for chaos to release new invaders into the wild. The very conditions we're creating through our carbon emissions, through our development patterns, through our consumption, make invasive species problems harder to solve. It's a vicious cycle where one environmental crisis feeds into another. Yet within this cautionary tale lies hope. Because if we caused this problem, if human choices led to this disaster, then human choices can also be part of the solution. We have agency. We have intelligence. We have the ability to learn from our mistakes and do better. Despite the devastation, despite the staggering losses, nature is showing us its resilience. And that resilience is remarkable, almost miraculous, when you consider what this ecosystem has endured. In areas where python removal efforts have been most intensive, where teams have concentrated their work over multiple years, researchers are documenting small but significant recoveries. Some mammal populations are stabilizing. Camera traps are capturing images of raccoons, of opossums, of foxes, species that had nearly vanished from these areas. The numbers are still far below historical levels, but they are not zero. They're not gone. Bird nesting sites in these intensively managed zones are seeing improved success rates. More chicks are surviving to fledge. More nests are producing young. It's fragile, it's tentative, but it's real progress. Certain native species are adapting in ways that surprise researchers. Alligators, particularly larger individuals, occasionally prey on younger pythons, controlling them in a way we can't. Some birds have adjusted their nesting behaviors, choosing different locations or times that reduce python predation. Certain mammals have become more nocturnal, more cautious, developing behaviors that help them avoid these new predators. The ecosystem isn't dead, it's transforming, seeking a new equilibrium. It's not the same ecosystem it was, and it may never be again, but it's finding ways to persist. That's what nature does. Given even the smallest chance, it adapts, it survives, it persists. Conservation organizations are seizing this moment to restore habitat, to create wildlife corridors that allow native species to move safely, to protect the populations that remain. They're working to remove invasive plants that compete with native vegetation. They're restoring natural water flow patterns that were disrupted by human development. Every native animal that survives is a seed of recovery, a chance for the ecosystem to rebuild itself over time. The python invasion has also galvanized public attention in unprecedented ways. People who never thought much about invasive species, who never considered the consequences of the exotic pet trade, now understand the stakes. Floridians take pride in protecting their unique natural heritage. Young people are inspired to pursue careers in conservation biology, in wildlife management, in ecology, driven by a desire to prevent the next ecological crisis, to be part of the solution. Technology continues to advance at a rapid pace. Machine learning algorithms get better at detecting pythons every year. Tracking methods become more sophisticated. Drones become more capable. Genetic analysis helps us understand python population structure and movement patterns. With each passing year, we get smarter, faster, more effective at managing the problem. New partnerships are forming between government agencies, universities, nonprofits, and private companies. Resources are being pooled. Knowledge is being shared. The fight against invasive pythons has become a model for how to approach complex environmental challenges through collaboration. The battle for Florida's swamps isn't over. It may never truly be over. This could be a management challenge that lasts for generations, a price we pay indefinitely for the mistakes of the past. But every python removed is a victory for native wildlife. Every native species that survives is a triumph against extinction. Every person who learns from this crisis, who changes their behavior, who spreads awareness, is an investment in the future. The Everglades has endured for thousands of years, adapting to hurricanes, droughts, floods, and fires. It's survived ice ages and warming periods. It's one of the most resilient ecosystems on Earth, shaped by time and evolution into something unique and irreplaceable. With continued intervention, sustained monitoring, and unwavering commitment, it can survive this invasion too. But it needs our help. It needs your help. Support organizations working to protect Florida's wetlands. Donate if you can. Volunteer if you're local. Share their message if you're not. Never release exotic pets into the wild, no matter the circumstances. Rehoming and sanctuaries are always better options. If you live in Florida, learn to identify pythons and report sightings immediately to authorities. Teach others, especially young people, about the interconnectedness of ecosystems and the devastating impact of invasive species. The swamps of Florida are more than just wilderness, more than just scenery. They're a water filtration system for millions of people, cleaning and storing the water we depend on. They're a nursery for species found nowhere else on Earth, species that exist only in these wetlands. They're a buffer against hurricanes and storm surge, protecting coastal communities. They're a testament to nature's creativity and resilience, a window into what wild America once looked like. And they're worth fighting for. They're worth every effort, every dollar, every hour spent wading through swamps, hunting pythons. The question isn't whether we can save the Everglades. The question is whether we will, whether we have the determination, the commitment, the wisdom to undo the damage we've caused. The choice, as always, is ours. What will we choose?